Thanks for being here on a lovely Tuesday evening. You know, this is the week after the quarter has ended here, so we were curious if we could get folks to come to campus for an event. So I'm just so happy that you all made it here. My name is Jacqueline Stewart, and I curate the program Cinema 53 at the Harper Theater. I'm a professor here in the Department of Cinema and Media Studies. I also direct the Gray Center for Arts and Inquiry, which is right across the way here from the Logan Center. And it's just an absolute pleasure to be with all of you and with our amazing panel to talk together about the history and the practice of exhibiting Black film in Chicago. I want to offer a few thanks just at the start. First, to the Center for the Study of Race, Politics, and Culture, gave us the resources to pull this panel together. I also want to thank Sabrina Craig back there and Avery LaFlamme also back there. We are the team that's been working on this project, kicking off with this event, a study of the history of Black film exhibition in Chicago. This is the kind of area of film studies that can be difficult for scholars to investigate because unlike studying films, we're trying to study film culture, like what happens when people show films and watch films. And to my mind, the best way to do that is to bring together the people who have done that work. It really relies on getting their stories, their testimonies, hearing about their practices. So we're interested in collecting these stories and sharing them and having dialogue with folks like you about your experiences watching Black films in Chicago, because it's about the interplay between the programmers, the exhibitors, and the audience. We're also hoping that we can pull together some of the artifacts of Black film exhibition in Chicago, like flyers, postcards. We asked folks to bring stuff, and a few people did. There's a little table right there with a few items. I think Mike and I brought most of the stuff that's over there. So that we're trying to piece this history together, the kinds of materials that don't always make it into archival collections. I also want to mention that CAN TV is here, videotaping this program. I think you saw some of the filming in progress signs outside. I hope so, because seeing that is your authorization to be filmed as a part of this event. So if you're not comfortable being recorded, maybe like sit behind the camera or something, or try to be incognito, as my mother would say.
You mean if you're wanted?
Yeah, right, if you owe somebody money. Okay, so the flow of the evening will be as follows. I'm going to introduce everyone, pose a few questions. I hope we can take some time, guys, to have a conversation with each other. The panelists can ask each other questions and weigh in on some of the topics that we'll be talking about, and then we'll open it up for a discussion. And I think we'll still have some time to finish the refreshments and wine at the back of the room and have some conversation after the program ends. Does that sound good? All right, so we switched the order up a little bit, so I'll start with Randy.
Okay, sure.
Crumpton. Randy is a film programmer who runs the Black Perspectives program series at the Chicago International Film Festival, which just celebrated its 21st year last year. I'm sure many of you have attended Black Perspective screenings at CIFF, and Randy has been at the center of organizing all kinds of not just screenings, but events with filmmakers and actors, honoring many very important figures over these years. Next to Randy is Sergio Mims, who is, to my mind, synonymous with the Black Harvest Film Festival. He's the programmer and consultant on that festival that showcases films relating to Black experience on a global scale. Sergio is also a screenwriter and a film critic, and he serves as writer of IndieWire's Shadow and Act blog, which he co-founded, where he's always writing some rather incendiary reviews and commentaries on contemporary media culture.
Then what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, this will be our 24th year at Black Harvest.
Black
Next year
Harvest.
will be the 25th
25.
anniversary.
Yeah, that's huge.
Wow, time flies.
It sure does. Next up is Floyd Webb. Floyd is a filmmaker, a producer, and a media consultant who in 1982 founded the Black Light Festival of International Black Cinema, Chicago's first Black-oriented film festival, the precursor to the Black Harvest Festival, and he served as its creative director. In 2005, Floyd and Elisa Starks, who's also on our panel, founded Black World Cinema, a showcase of seldom seen classic features and new films from around the world at the Studio Movie Grill in Chatham. Hey, Elisa.
Hello.
Elisa Starks, my former neighbor. I miss you. Is a Chicago entrepreneur and founder of the entertainment company Inner City Entertainment, or ICE, which launched the country's first African-American-owned chain of movie theaters in Chatham and in Lawndale. And then ICE, of course, expanded into other theaters in Chicago as well. She was the inaugural chair of the Chicago International Film Festival's Black Perspectives program. So there's a lot of little linking chains between the people that we have up here that I hope we'll talk about. Last but not least is Michael W. Phillips Jr., who is the founder and executive director of Southside Projections, a nonprofit that presents films at locations across Chicago's South Side. Previously, Michael has served as the founding director of the Black Cinema House. He was the founding film programmer of the Chicago International Movies and Music Festival, where he brought in all kinds of people, including Melvin Van Peebles, who was here as a part of that festival a few years ago. And the Cinematech and Videotech manager of Facets Multimedia. He was also the last director of the Bank of America Cinema. Did any of you ever go to the Bank of America Cinema back in the day? Which was a really important repertory program. So let's give a round of applause to all of our panelists. So I'd like to start with you, Randy.
Sure.
Because you're right next to me. And I'm hoping that each of you can respond by talking about how you got into the business, the practice of showing films.
Well, I had always been a creative person, and I went to law school and became a lawyer. And somehow I thought that law school had took away my muse somewhat. And so I decided to get it. One of the things I decided to do was to do some entertainment law and to continue to be creative and to continue to write. And many years ago, I went to the first ever Acapulco Black Film Festival. And I think at that time I met Elisa Starks, who at that time was on the board of the Chicago International Film Festival, who got me involved in the Chicago International Film Festival. And she served on the board and was the person who was one of the founding members of the Black Perspectives program, which then I think it was a celebration of Black cinema. And the inaugural honoree that year was Spike Lee. And they showed a retrospective of Spike Lee's films, and Four Little Girls, I think was the film that was out that year. And from there, the next year we continued Black Perspectives, and I stayed on the committee, and at some point, Elisa Starks resigned from the board of the Chicago International Film Festival, and I stepped in and became a board member, and chaired the Black Perspectives program that continued to program the Black Perspectives section of the Chicago International Film Festival.
I see. Yeah.
So that's how I got involved, and I stayed involved because when I travel to other film festivals, a lot of independent Black filmmakers want to see their films in the general market festival, and so it's their quest to continue to be involved in the, or want to have the film seen by general market. And so that's what kept me involved with the festival all these years.
I see. It's a route for Black filmmakers to be able to show their work outside of the circuit of Black film festivals.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you. Sergio.
You know, I don't know where to
you get
begin.
take this,
Oh,
please.
I don't know where to begin because my life has been such a journey. Years ago, I used to work in movies, and like one of the films I worked on one time in LA was a film called Penitentiary, directed by Jamal Fanaka, part of the LA Rebellion, which is out on Blu-ray with my commentary. And by the way, another plug, Sweet Sweetback, badass song on Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray has just come out, also with my historical commentary.
Yes.
That's
That's
right.
worth the price of the disc.
I'm telling you,
Right, so-
that's my new occupation, the movie commentaries. But what I wanted to, but that all leads to the fact that here in Chicago I love movies, and I particularly love black cinema. And I was involved with Blacklight with Floyd and Terry Glover back when she was Terry White. And I was there for a few years, and then later I was asked to get involved with Black Harvest, also with Terry White. She was involved at the time. She was the one that actually came up with the title of the festival, Black Harvest. And at the time, like a lot of things I get involved in, I think is only be temporary. Oh, okay, fine. Be a few years. And I said 24 years later, I'm still with the festival. And it takes a year to put it together. And we're still working on it right now, as we're talking right now. And the point I wanted to say was this. Something that always kind of irks me is when people talk about black cinema, black movies. So many black films came out this year, and almost always to talk about movies released by Hollywood studios. And then when, if like only 4 movies, black films come out of Hollywood studios, then it's like, what's happening? It's like something's terrible. And the overwhelming majority of black films are made totally independent, outside the studio system. And these films have to be seen. They have to be seen by the public. There is an audience for them. And so that's why black film festivals are so important, because this is a great venue for people to see these movies. Movies that don't, I mean, really, do you want to see Superfly remake again? And that's the point. So it's a venue for there's so many filmmakers, really even more than you can imagine, who are making all these really extraordinary movies. You should see some of the films we're going to be showing this year at Black Harvest, and that were submitted to us. We didn't even solicit them, that are really remarkable, and they have to be seen by a public. Our audience has grown bigly over the years. Incredibly. Every year we break records.
So wait, Sergio, are you saying that your motivation primarily has been to be to provide a platform?
To be a
for-
conduit?
Your word. I said platform.
Yes, because, let's put it this way. Black cinema has been around for over a century. It's not going away, and if anything can be done to help filmmakers get their films to be seen, I want to be part of that.
Great. Thank you. Floyd. He needs a microphone too.
I can speak loudly. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I grew up on 22nd and State Street in the East Projects. I had cinema experiences before that in Mississippi. I had the experience of walking around to the back, up metal stairs on 100-degree days into an air-conditioned, quote-unquote, crow's nest, where I would watch films like Queen of Outer Space, starring Zsa Zsa Gabor, right? Which is kind of ridiculous that I even remember it, but it was. But you know, in Mississippi, we didn't. You know, like I grew up in the '50s in Mississippi before we moved here. So when I came here, my cinema experience was limited to. I got my mom. My dad was in the Army. I was my mom's Sunday date. So we used to go up to 47th Street to the theaters. We'd go to the Met, go have lunch after church at the Walgreens on the corner, you know. And I got her to take me to see Rodin one time. She said she's never taken me to the movies again. I had to go by myself or with my friends, right? But a few things led to it. It's like, you know, my interest in cinema was like really deep because I had seen a documentary about Alfred Hitchcock and just looking at the process. And then one day, I think in March 1964, I was about 11 years old. No, I was 10 years old still. I hadn't even maybe 11. We were downtown because living on 22nd and State Street, you were on the edge of Bronzeville. You can walk downtown. You can walk to the museum, to the museum campus. You know, you can. You know, I didn't go with the little boy shoplift at Sears, but you know, I wasn't doing that. But some of those guys did that, and we used to sneak in the movies sometimes. You know, we would go down and do this. I was like inundated. One day we were down there, and they had just built Marina City, and there was this big machine down there, like right below the bridge. A big machine, and they were making a film, and the film was called Mickey One. Has anybody seen that movie? Mickey One. It had Warren Beatty in it. And we hung around that thing. They shot from March until May, and we used to go down there every chance we get to try to watch this process, you know. And actually, you know, I had forgotten about it. A friend of mine said, "Remember when we used to?" I'm like, "Remember when?" No, I remember when we used to have to run from the Dearborn homes, but I don't remember it. But like we talked about it, and I was like, "Yeah, I remember." It was this big machine. It was a really weird movie. It was like a Fellini movie, right? You have to see this movie, right? Because when I saw them making the film, I had no idea that it was going to come out like that. It's the craziest, most surreal, most avant-garde film that's ever come out of Hollywood. And that's why it didn't stand in theaters very long, you know. But I fell in love with that type of cinema, seeing that film, you know, like years later. But my introduction to cinema was also kind of like to exhibition. In the projects, we used to have a lot of people, before the riots, before all the stuff, we had a bunch of white people who used to come to the projects all the time on their missions, right? We had this one church group that used to come, and they would show films outside, which was like great, you know what I mean? We were in the projects, and the projects were not that bad in 1960, 61. So we had all of this exposure, you know. This is prior this is prior to the Black Arts Movement, prior to the Black Power movement, you know. It was a real different place. But the other thing about it was I had people around me like Hammurabi Rob. Anybody remember him? Yeah. Hammurabi Rob. You know, Ham used to show movies back in the 30s. He used to show documentaries back in the 30s. And he used to talk about this. And he was around all the time. And like I would hang around Charlie Burroughs and Margaret Burroughs. You know, I would be at their house for like salons with people. And so I was getting all of this exposure, plus living on 22nd, we had a Chicago Defender, Johnson Publishing, Mohammed Speaks, Quinn Chapel Church, and this is our little run, plus Chinatown where we work, and I'm seeing these things and I'm hearing about cinema, film. But I never really went to film because they tried to make me, when I said I wanted to make movies when I was in high school, oh no, they don't have schools for filmmaking. Why don't you be a mechanic? I learned about tracking. You know, I learned about tracking. I learned about you know, about how that stuff works. But the thing I think that really moved me to do this is I was into martial arts back then, and there were Japanese films at Francis Parker Auditorium every weekend. It was run by a guy by the name of Omar Kahatsu, and Omar was Chicago was the only city that had a resettlement plan or would accept Japanese internees. So we ended up with a huge Japanese community here after World War I ended, and after they emptied out the camps. So Omar came here, and they had a 35mm projector down at Francis Parker Auditorium. And I mean, I saw every Japanese film ever made. By the time I was 20, I used to check in to Sears, where I had a job. To check in to Sears in the morning, check out at lunch, go to the movies, come back at 6 o'clock and punch out and go back to the movie.
Wow.
I got caught. You know, I got caught. And the guy and the manager said, "Floyd, what have you been doing?" I said, "I've been going to Japanese movies." He says, "I don't believe you." He said, "I'm going to fire you unless you tell me 5 movies you saw." And what did he do that for? I told him everything I had seen, and he was like, 30 days probation. You know, but the experience of like, I became a photojournalist, and I ended up in film because a lot of people that I met when I traveled were activists. I mean, I fell out of the activist community here into an activist community in England and in France, and eventually I ended up in Tanzania. working with Kanto Wasizwe, Frelimo. We did physical training. I worked with a guy by the name of Nantambu Wamani, who was a karate teacher. He had come from Okinawa, and he opened a school. He opened up the first karate school in Tanzania. So I worked with him while I worked as a photojournalist, and I met everybody. And on Friday nights, we used to go to the movies down on the dock. At one theater, they would have Muhammad, Messenger of God, and at the other theater, they would have something like not Sweet Sweetback, but some blaxploitation film. It would be blaxploitation, Muslim dramas, and kung fu movies. That was fair, right? But the experience was just going in and being with people. But I always had a mission for cinema. When I decided to do cinema, it was based on a meeting I had with Hugh Roberts. I met Hugh Roberts, and I got crazy story. I got flown out to LA when I was 19 because of a screenplay somebody said that I wrote that wasn't finished, but they sent me the ticket anyway. It was at a company called KCAL Productions. They put me in a Fleabag hotel on Sunset. And I didn't hear from them for 3 days. So in the middle of the night, I used to go down to Denny's right on Sunset there, and I met this guy, Hugh Robertson, and we got to talking, and Hugh was an editor, and he had been nominated for an Academy Award for Midnight Cowboy, I think it was. And I'm like, and I knew who he was because he edited a lot of independent films, and like I used to see these things on like Channel 11. Channel 11 used to be a wonderful resource for independent films. I mean, I saw Story of a Three-Day Pass on Channel 11. They used to have a program Friday evenings called Foreign Cinema, and Hugh was surprised that I knew that. We got to talking. I said, so what are you going to do next? You've been nominated for Academy Award. He says, I'm going to make my next movie, which was called Melinda, and I'm going to make that money, and I'm going to go back to Trinidad and open a film school. I said, really? He said, why? He says, because this is not a meritocracy out here. This is, every time I do something, I have to start all over again. He said he would rather train people and try to build an industry in the West Indies than put all of his life's blood into being in Hollywood. Or Hollywood, right. Holly Ain't, Holly Cake, for what we call it, right? And I had examples of people like that, and it's sort of like really, that kind of like really motivated me, looking at all the people around me in Chicago, all of these independent people, the people like Hammurabi Rob, Margaret Burroughs, people who were building institutions, right? And that's really what and once I had made these global connections, I mean, it was pretty easy because most of the people, when I was working as a photojournalist, most of the people that I knew in the late 70s, in the mid to late 70s, were in journalism or something. At the beginning of the 80s, people made a shift into film. So the people that I knew in England, they had gone from talking film theory to making movies because they had something called the Black Film Workshops. The Black Film Workshops provided money, training, not only money and training, a space and equipment, and not only the space and equipment, contracts. Each of these Black Film Workshops was given a contract by the British TV channels, BBC, Channel 4. Channel 4 led that charge, right? So you had this work growing up at the same time the LA Rebellion, and I was fortunate enough to meet all of these people, right? And so I had a relationship based on, that went back to the mid-70s. There was a film festival before Blacklight that was, and I can't remember the woman's name who put it together, but it was held at the South Shore Film Festival, South Shore High School. And she organized it one year, we helped, and...
Does anybody know what that is?
I'll remember her name in a minute. But also before that film festival, there was a group called Cheto. They used to show movies. It was Peter Blue. Anybody know Peter Blue? Somebody knows Peter Blue. Max Feeman. Peter Blue, Max Feeman. Max Feeman used to work at the Chicago Defender. And was it Osho Mugwana? Yeah, it was about 4 people. They were showing all of the New Yorker films, the Cuban films. They were showing Usman Sembane films at the Tiki Room between the Quinn Chapel Church and the Chicago Defender at the Tiki Room, right? So, so it's like,
Wow.
so, and I'm just running into, so I'm just running into this stuff all the time. And so Blacklight happened because they didn't do another festival, and I had gone to the first Black Film Festival at the Commonwealth Institute in London and met all of my friends who were making movies and said, hey, there's a film festival in Chicago, you guys want to show? Everybody said, yeah. I came back, but there was no festival. And that's how it all started.
Wow. Thank you, Floyd. Elisa,
Okay,
how
so-
did you get involved with
Oh my
film?
God, so my story is not as passionate as these other folks, it's so much more practical. But I will say, the first movie I remember seeing is Superfly. So I'm excited. I will say that. But how I got started in film exhibition, was by chance. I always knew as a young child that I wanted to, finish, get my master's, work in the corporate world, and then ultimately own a business. That business was supposed to be restaurants. And when I graduated, got my master's, then went on to work for Burrell in, Black Targeted Advertising Agency. Did that, and then shortly after I got married, my husband and I moved to Los Angeles. And there we met the owners of the Baldwin Theater, which was the first African-American first-run theater. They had been second-run, presumably before, and along with an advertising agency called Pat Tobin and the Justice Department, fought the movie industry for access to first-run films. So I got a piece of history when I got there, but when I got there, it was a single-screen theater on Crenshaw that had been converted to a 3-screen theater, showing first-run films. While there, the owner of the theater, their children were about my age, and we traveled Martha's Vineyard, never thinking about developing my own movie theater. And it wasn't until we got back into Chicago, moved back into our condo in South Shore, and because I didn't want to stay in LA, that's another story. But when we got back, I saw someone putting a for sale sign on the old Hamilton Theater that's now demolished. And the light bulb went on. It was like we just spent the last 3 years going around with these people that own these movie theaters. We can do that. And I thought in my head, because of my experience working at Burrell, what is the #1 form of entertainment for African Americans outside of the home? Movie theaters. So let's call these people up and figure out if they're interested in coming to Chicago. And at the time they weren't, but I was always the person that, they gonna figure out they wanna do this by the end of the day. Well, they didn't figure it out. What happened was they were in partnership at that time, I think it was with AMC, to launch 22 movie theaters in the LA County area. So they said, while I'm not quite interested in coming to Chicago right now, we do need to see more African Americans get into this line of business. So whatever support and help you need, we'll offer. Well, a few months down the line, that deal with AMC went sour. And the owners of the Baldwin Theater, because they were primarily a real estate development company, they decided they wanted to sell the Baldwin. So they picked up the phone, said, hey, y'all that couple that are interested in movie theaters, well, we're selling a movie theater. And so at that time, my husband was an investment banker, and we knew like some of Magic Johnson's investors, one of the guys that was with a firm that he used to invest, Lim Daniels, and we put together a team of people to go buy the Baldwin. And by the time we were doing that, we had done a lot of due diligence on this idea of developing movie theaters, and multiplex movie theaters were really big. And so we had all this ammunition in our head, all of this, the beginnings of a business plan in our head. We had Chatham as a site for our first theater, but said, we can probably go get this deal done somewhere else before we get it in Chicago, so let's just go. And we met with the owners of the Baldwin and signed our confidentiality, agreements, and looked at the numbers and said, this is everything we thought it would be. They were just driving cash through the business. And we were so excited. We were like, dang, but they're asking too much money. We said we had done our homework enough that we knew we could develop our own brand new spanking multiplex movie theater, probably anywhere other than New York and LA, and do this. And so we turned away. Magic turned away. Ken Lombard, who actually worked for the Baldwin Theater at the time, had been a longtime friend of Magic's, took Magic to Sony, and then we were courted by the city of Atlanta to put up a theater there. But that's the story of how the interest in the theaters, and of course, ultimately, we ended up partnering with Cineplex Odeon to develop 3 multiplex theaters here in Chicago. So that was that. You're next.
So I got into film exhibition the summer of 2004. I was unemployed, and a guy who I had taken a filmmaking class at Chicago Filmmakers with was the projectionist at this weird theater called, at the time it was the LaSalle Bank Cinema, which was a 300-seat theater that showed 35mm movies hidden in a bank branch on the northwest side. If you were driving, it was at the Six Corners at Irving Park and Cicero. If you were driving by, you would not know that there was a theater in there. It was kind of a badly kept secret that you had to go around the back and through the parking lot to get in. And we showed classic Hollywood movies on Saturday nights, including Mickey 1. We showed that in 35mm, and it is as crazy and as must-see as Floyd described. I was there for 6 years. I started out as the projectionist, and then I was the shorts programmer, and then I was the co-programmer, and then I was the programmer, and I decided I was the director. After I hired a couple of people, I became a director. And then the bank closed it, as banks do, because they don't care about community. I should mention that this theater had been in existence since 1972, back when community-owned banks cared enough about their communities to build a 300-seat movie theater, with 35mm projection. And the only reason it lasted as long as it did was that the string of banks that bought, the increasingly bigger banks that bought this space, couldn't figure out a cost-effective way to level the floor because it was raked seating. So the theater stayed because they couldn't think of anything else to do. And then finally, Bank of America figured out something to do, which was to sell the building. My fellow projectionists and programmers wanted to continue doing that sort of repertory cinema 35mm thing, and they are now the Chicago Film Society. They show movies up at Northeastern Illinois, and also at the Music Box. But I wanted to do something closer to home. I live here in Hyde Park, and also it's one thing to make a 2-hour public transit trip when you're getting paid to do it, and it's quite another thing if it suddenly becomes a volunteer gig. So for a while, one of the slides that flipped by is I showed 30s and 40s jazz films on a portable projector in a storefront in the old Harper Court before they tore it all down and built a Hyatt. And I decided I wanted to create an organization that was sort of, it was more in line with what I wanted from cinema, which is, number one, I like radical documentaries from the 60s and 70s. And two, I like to talk about films. At the theater, we would show the film and then everyone would leave, and that, it was great, but there was something missing. So I decided to create Southside Projections. we don't have a headquarters. We partner with different organizations. We did our first screening, actually. My spouse, Rebecca Zorak, was doing some research on Art and Soul, which was an art gallery run by the conservative vice lords. And she had a DVD of a VHS tape of the French television broadcast of a film called Lord Thing. And I was like, well, let's show this. We did it at the Southside Community Arts Center because the organization is Southside Projections, and of course the Vice Lords were a West Side gang, but we made an exception. And actually, Chicago Film Archives, when they saw the announcement, said, hey, we have a film about the Vice Lords too, called The Corner, which was shot about 10 years before. So it was it wasn't even the first of many partnerships with Chicago Film Archives, because when I was running the bank, they did one of their first screenings, the Black Panther one, right? Yeah. I can't remember what it was called.
You know.
Chicago's Marching Orders? Was that? Yeah. Yeah. So, you may have noticed that I am somewhat more melanin deficient than my esteemed panelists.
I'm glad you said it, and we didn't say it, right?
Yeah, I never wanted to be the white guy who was coming into Black and Hispanic neighborhoods and saying, let me explain your culture to you, because I'm not that person. From the beginning, our screenings have always been, I'm behind the scenes, and I almost always have someone to introduce the film and lead a discussion, someone who is less white than me, preferably less male than me. Last year we used 27 speakers, and 25 of them were either women or people of color. It's something that we really believe in, and we do everything we can to stick with it. And then, so I did Southside Projections been doing it for a couple of years, and Theaster Gates, who I had been friends with for a while, and had started making a documentary about him, said that he wanted to start. Well, so he said, sort of in conversation, what I want to do is I want to start a Black cinema house, and I want you to help me run it. And I took him literally, and I called it the Black Cinema House. And he actually came back to me and he said, did we talk about that? That was the name? And I said, well, I thought we did, but maybe not. And the agreement was that I would run it for a year, get it up and running, because I knew about sort of non-theatrical film presentation. I knew how to find the rights holders. I knew about showing films from a portable 16mm projector sitting on a stack of milk crates in the middle of the room. And at Black Cinema House, also, I was not going to be the white guy who was, explaining Black cinema to African Americans. And one of the first series, I was thinking about it. I was there for a year, and I actually didn't choose any programs myself. What I did was I chose people. And Jackie was already sort of involved before. You had conversations with Theaster, but we brought in people like Jackie, like Romy Crawford, Sergio. We invited Ron Pitts to do a screening shortly before he died. We let Floyd have a birthday party there so that he would pick a film to show.
Only because Melvin Van Peebles made that happen.
Yeah, and
That's the only reason.
we also, I hired a programmer in residence, Amir George, who would be up here today, except he's now a famous filmmaker and he's in New York working on a project. And I let him, choose films, and I mentored him about, putting programs together and doing advertising and things like that. And now he created the Black Radical Imagination touring program. He's really going places, and I'm glad that I was a little part of that. So yeah. I'm going to trail off now.
Thank you all. So I mentioned before that there are all these linkages across the practices that you've described, your experiences, how you've supported each other, gotten each other started, the communities of people here sometimes, feels very small in Chicago. And there are tremendous advantages to that. I think we see that in the comments that you just made. But I wonder if you could talk about some of the challenges, too, of working in Chicago. If there are things that you have encountered in terms of the ways that you've tried to create spaces for showing Black film, or maybe not, maybe it's been an easy road, but I would imagine that there are also some challenges that you can talk about that might be related to, say, this city's very legendary racial segregation, ways that Black film can be categorized in relationship to general market films. If you could maybe describe some of the ways in which working in Chicago, ways you've overcome challenges of doing the work that you do in Chicago. Elisa, you had your finger up.
Yeah, I had my hand up and then I kind of felt like I should take it back. I'll start with just challenges in general versus challenges because of Chicago or overall, but challenges in the market. One of the things I didn't mention earlier is that once I decided we were going to do movie theaters, I know I don't only wanted just to put movie theaters in Black communities and that's all it. I mean, we had a mission, and one of the things I felt very strongly about was that this would be a platform to give Black filmmakers an opportunity to get their films on the screen. We knew we were going to do first run. We're going to show the Hollywood latest and greatest things, but we did see ourselves as a platform for allowing Black filmmakers who always dream of getting their films, on that big screen. And I had resistance because we were partners when we started with Cineplex Odeon, a Toronto-based company. At the time we built the 3 theaters here in Chicago, they had the leading share of screens in the market. And of course they felt they knew film. And we know the film industry. And I'm like, well, this is just not about film. This is about film in our communities. And so we did have some resistance about certain things that they wanted to do and how they wanted to do, how marketing would be done. That's why initially, and I think it may be on the shot of the one of the theaters, the dual marketing, which kind of confused people. Is this Cineplex or is this ICE? And it was like, what are y'all doing? So there was that internal fight with the directors of a lot of the departments within Cineplex Odeon about how to market, what films to show, and we were constantly proving them wrong. They discredited the one that I am Black, but that didn't have to mean anything, but one that I'm studied, a professional marketer targeted to African American people. And so one of the things that happened was Star Wars came out as an example. And they were so excited. This is going to be really big for your movie theaters. We've secured, I forgot how many screens of Star Wars. I was like, wait. This is not like the biggest thing that happened to our community, Star Wars. And afterwards, they wrote a letter because, yes, it did some business, but we didn't need all those screens of Star Wars. So it was those kind of fights that we would have on an ongoing basis with Cineplex Odeon about what to do for our theaters. We own the theater. They were there to help facilitate management because we had never done it before, right? Another example of, them knowing it all the time was in marketing to African Americans. At that time, most of the circuits were all doing newspaper advertising, so they had directory listings. And Cineplex kind of had a practice of, when it's slow months, so, not the summer, not the winter, but in those slow periods to pull back on their listings. And specifically with certain theaters, like if they thought they weren't performing or something like that. So instead of picking up the phone, which was what they were supposed to do to tell us anything you're getting ready to do, you just don't do anything. They pulled out of Sun Times Tribute. They just simply just flat out pulled out of all the newspapers. I got calls immediately about, I'm like, let me get on the phone with these people and find out why you pulled out a newspaper. I said, wait. You can't make a decision without calling us. If you were gonna do that, for me, you should have pulled out of the Tribune for clear and obvious reasons, right?
Yes.
All right, we all get it. I said, you could have pulled out of everything you're in, but don't pull out the Tribune. I said, my Tribune, not that there weren't any black people reading the Tribune, but those were, they tended to be a certain kind of blacks, if I can explain it from a marketing standpoint and be diplomatic, that they could get it online, they could do other things, but you don't pull out the Sun Times when you got seniors, you got everybody and calling. So those were kind of the challenges. Then, of course, the challenges of getting certain kind of product, Badass, you know, it's an artsy black film. And they're saying, well, you know, they're kind of gearing all toward artsy theaters. And I'm a first run, new releases. I said, but you can't have the black theater in the city of Chicago and not show Badass. So I have to fight continually for those kind of films. So anyway, I'll pass it on.
Yeah. You know, I started real early, right? I started very early, 1982. Didn't know what I was doing, but there was an agenda, and that agenda was that I had met all of these filmmakers, and we were pretty much pursuing the same agenda that we had throughout the, actually from 1969. You know, we made a commitment, a bunch of us made a commitment to be cultural workers when Fred Hampton was killed, right? We made that commitment, and that followed a lot of us. A lot of us ended up leaving the country. A lot of us came back, and we're all over the place right now. We're like the 47 Ronin. We're coming back. You know, we're coming back now. And that commitment was to educating people, by being cultural workers, to educate people through cinema, right? To show a specific kind of a film that had a specific kind of message. Like, and I was and finding people like a board of directors for an organization to look at my film program and tell me what films that I could or couldn't show, or to have somebody at the film center of the Art Institute tell me that they didn't like Daughters of the Dust and I shouldn't screen it, was beyond me, you know? And you know, the other thing was that, like, we were really trying to build an institution. Blacklight was when we started Blacklight, we started it as a not-for-profit, as a membership organization. At one point, we had about 500 members, and that's how we financed the things that we were doing. And everybody always thought that we had some kind of a deal with these theaters. We were in a 50-50 deal with everybody, you know. I searched out all the films. Terry, when Terry started working, when Terry White, the late Terry Glover, was working with me when she came in, we used to be there on the phone. We were sending things called telexes to people. You know what I mean? We were sending telexes to people to, like, try to get people to let us screen the films, because I would go and meet the people either at the Berlin Festival or someplace, and you know, and we would be in touch, and it was really hard, because people were like, well, you know, you shouldn't show so many international films. When Richard Pena was here at the Art Institute, when he was at the School of the Art Institute, me and Richard saw eye to eye. That's because Richard was a closet Puerto Rican. Didn't nobody do it. Richard was like underground, right? So me and Richard Pena hit it off really good. So Richard really made Blacklight, helped to make Blacklight happen. If I wanted an international filmmaker, Richard would figure out how to do it. So we got Suleiman Cisse, and he showed Yellen. We got Sergio Herrall, who showed his slavery trilogy. Nothing's ever been seen like this. Malawala, Ranchiador, and the other Francisco. Those films have not been seen. You know, not since, they haven't been back here since then, I don't think. You know, and we did some things in Blacklight. I mean, like, I remember going to the Berlin Film Festival, and people were like, "Oh, you're from Chicago?" And I was like, "Yeah." And people knew Blacklight. I ended up I landed in Senegal one time, and I was in the taxi. The guy asked me where I was from. He says, have you heard of the Blacklight Film Festival? I said, how do you know about it? Because of Voice of America. Voice of America covered the festival, you know? And you know, like, my best story is somebody asked Michael Kutz if he was from the Blacklight Film Festival in Berlin. And they came and told me, oh, I thought that Michael Kutz was you. I said, yeah, so you out your damn mind. But it was, but you know, it's like finding people of like mind to work with was really difficult because I was not a person who was in Hollywood at all, right? Most of the cinema that I loved had nothing to do with Hollywood, right? You know, it's the stuff we were watching when I was growing up. We were watching Costa Gavras. We were watching Gilo Pontecorvo. You know, we were watching radical filmmakers. You know, all through the 70s, and that's the kind of cinema that we wanted to make. You know, and the extension of that was something like LA Rebellion, Sankofa, Black Audio Film Collective, and Sankofa did some incredible. It hasn't been equaled yet. You know what I mean? You know, that is a lesson. The Black British workshops. Yeah, those films are incredible. Every now and then you see something that comes close to that. You know, so it's been really, you know, it's been quite a journey to like watch this work and then to look at the new work arising. The stuff that Amir George is programming is really incredible. You know, the experimental films. A lot of times, experimental films are real difficult for people because it's like listening to avant-garde jazz. I play music, and it's like that's my sensibility. I like stuff that's a culture, that's offbeat, that makes you think in a different way. You know, and it's good for people to think in different ways. You know, and Chicago is not necessarily a place where people want to think in a different way a lot of times, and that's a challenge in itself. You know,
But it sounds like you're saying that you can find those communities, and when you show things, people will sometimes take the chance.
Yeah, but the way that it happened,
Yeah.
the success of Blacklight is based on one thing we did, and that is we published our old paper. We would put out 20,000 copies. We were most successful. The years we couldn't afford to do that, we didn't get the kind of crowds. But when we did these papers of our film schedule, and we would put them in the laundromats, barber shops, barbecue places, you know, and we would get people who don't come out to films. I would have people, man, I ain't been to see a film in 10 years. You know, I mean, that's the kind of people, you know, and there's people, and I'm talking young and old people, you know, and then they see something and they read it. You know, it's like when we premiered She's Gotta Have It, we had a line down the street. There was no advertising for this thing. Just our paper, just that picture from the film brought people out to see that film, right? Just reading, you know, I mean, people saw that, they were like, I said, how'd you hear it? Oh man, you know, everybody had the paper, you know. I would ask people, how many people got our paper? They were like, oh, hold it up. You know, it was amazing. And so like now, that's why I kind of put a hold on Black World Cinema for a minute, because I'm trying to re-strategize, because social networking has its uses, but it doesn't get to a large part of the population. You know, there's no bandwidth in the Black community. The bandwidth has gotten worse over the years, right? It's gotten worse, and none of your aldermen are talking about this crap. You know, it's, you know, like AT&T, Comcast, all of these people, they're throttling the bandwidth. You can't, you know, it's like I watch my phone. I go from downtown to like 95th. I watch the bars on my phone go, duk, 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 duk. And then in certain places it goes way up. And it's like, I used to be able to do Skype interviews with filmmakers at the theater.
Right.
Can't do it anymore because the bandwidth isn't there, you know? And nobody wants to fight for it. Nobody wants to get out and talk to these doggone. I don't live in Chicago anymore, so y'all on your own.
Oh, well, I got to do
So it
something.
sounds like you're saying the paper, you know, a different mode of non-digital communication is still very important to reach
You need
that audience.
you need it all. It's just
Yeah.
like when cinema came, theater didn't go away. When television came, radio didn't go away.
Right,
You know,
Right.
when you know, it's like when streaming video came, the movie houses still haven't gone away.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, like books haven't gone any place. People keep, you know, people have these doomsday scenarios about structures and about formats, and they don't go away.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I wonder if you guys have any thoughts about the Chicago specificity
Well,
question?
you know, we've had challenges, of course, with the Chicago International Film Festival. The Chicago International Film Festival is one of the oldest in North America, and it's been around for what? This is the 54th year, and Black Perspectives has been a part of that for 21 years. And there's been a lot of, we've had some issues, of course. And again, the reason I stay involved is because a lot of Black independent filmmakers want to have their films seen by a general audience. And it's hard sometimes getting an audience for some of these films. And they came up with a list for me, actually, of all the films that we have shown in these 21 years. Wow. And I look at some of these films, I'm like, my God, these are some great films, and many of them did not get seen by the public. Park Day was a film that was shown many years ago. Black Aria, Lift, Kerry Washington, one of Kerry Washington's first films I saw her in, that I loved. And it's interesting with what's going on today, because Lift was a film done by Demond Davis, who, after many years, Ava DuVernay brought her back to direct Queen Sugar. Right. I mean, a lot of these people who have made these films back in years ago weren't doing anything. Clement Virgo.
Can I just say something to that?
Yeah.
From Demond Davis, and she said that Ava had to find her through a direct message on Twitter.
Wow.
To find her.
Wow.
To hire her. But she was so obscure by now.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah.
She was.
And I love that film, Live. It's one of my favorite films that we showed during the Chicago International Film Festival. So I mean, and that's the struggle year to year I have sometimes with the people at the festival, because can these films sell tickets?
No, go ahead.
That's one of the issues, and so then the question you have to throw back to them is, are they being lost in your marketing? Because it's such a huge festival, they show so many films. What can we do to, and the Black Perspectives Committee try to do things to help spark and get an audience for a lot of these films, but still, from year to year, it's a struggle. But I think that we have one of the best programs of the festival, and our tributes that we've done every year have certainly helped the festival. We've honored everyone from Spike Lee to Ruby Dee, Sidney Poitier. Last year we honored Alfred Woodard, Steve McQueen, and Jackie has helped moderate it and participated in a lot of our tributes. And with the films, sometimes I get calls from people who have submitted to the Chicago International Film Festival and will say to me, well, we also submitted to Black Harvest. And if we're not going to get in the Chicago International Film Festival, then we need to know so we can go ahead move forward with Black Harvest. And I get a quick answer for them.
Yes.
So they'll know that they can go ahead and move forward with Black Harvest. And Sergio would call me sometimes and say, I got this film that's submitted to Black Harvest, but I think it's a better fit for the Chicago International Film Festival. So we work together.
Well, just between you and me, I had a talk with Anthony Kaufman last week on that very issue. I got something for you. You got something for me? So, yes. I just want to say, in terms of your question, I will say this. I said we've been around for 24 years. Half of that was a struggle. More than half of that was a struggle. I recently, a few months ago, came across the very first program book for Black Harvest. And I would say, wow, that's pretty pathetic. And it's just grown over the years. And one of the struggles we had for a long time was that a lot of filmmakers didn't want to show films in Chicago. It wasn't a big enough market for them. You know, they were more interested, like, are we going to get a big prize? Are we going to get this? Are we going to get that? And we had to work at it, at a struggle. I mean, there were years where, boy, we were lucky if we had 2 good movies. I am not joking. This year, and one of the things, but it's different now, and this year alone, in terms of submissions, we got hundreds. I'm not joking. We got hundreds that we had to all watch.
So what changed?
What changed is, our reputation, because we've been around for so long and so many filmmakers have come, and actors and actresses, and everybody has always come back saying that this has been a wonderful experience. You ought to consider it. Number 2, we stuck around. We're here. Number 3, technology. Technology has changed everything. You know, we used to accept like DVD copies. You got a DVD screener. We don't accept that anymore. Now it's online screeners. And as a result, we have received movies from literally over the world. Not only in the United States, but Canada and Cuba and Puerto Rico. I just saw a wonderful Puerto Rican film movie last week about colorism, which is really extraordinary. South America, Africa, of course, UK, a lot of UK stuff, France. And the thing is that oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. I was just about to say something about all these films are just coming in. And now that we have this reputation, and our international reputation, and people want to come, and they want to show their pictures. I saw a film, one of the very first submissions we got, and this shows you the democratization of filmmaking. It's actually, we're going to show this picture. I can't officially announce it yet, but it's a film we were showing. It's a wonderful, really funny comedy with a bittersweet ending. This thing is very well made, totally professional, technically everything, solidly made. And I'm watching the film and I said, where was this picture shot? I can't figure it out. It's around Atlanta? Found out it's shot in Little Rock. And I said, I have never even heard of a feature shot in Little Rock. And this young brother made an absolutely hysterical comedy in Little Rock. And he's coming. And one of the things I want him to do is I want him to do a filmmaking panel. You don't have to be in Chicago. You don't have to be in New York. You don't have to be in Atlanta. You can make a movie right where you are. And he's the living example of it. I'm amazed it hasn't been picked up by Netflix or somebody. It hasn't been picked up yet. I kept hoping, I sure hope CIFF doesn't get it.
Too late.
It's not too late.
So being in Chicago is not a disadvantage anymore.
I think I just opened my big mouth. But because of technology, now anybody with a camera can make a movie anywhere. And also the weeding out process has happened because this has been going on for the last 10, 12 years. There have been filmmakers making movies with a camera. Just because you have a camera means you can make a movie. And there has been a weeding out process so that now the fortunate thing this year is that what I call the really bad stuff came in late. So, and that's really true. The bad stuff came in like last week or so before the deadline ended. And I was like, wow, thank God we didn't see this stuff in the beginning. Because the stuff was just coming in. And it was just great. It's like, oh my God, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. This is wonderful. This is ridiculous. So the technology has changed everything. It's really changed everything. And especially now for the better. And also I think for filmmakers and also for film festivals and anybody who shows movies now, because it's a more democracy now. You don't have, it's not almost a specialized thing. If you have the talent and you make something that's worthwhile, you're halfway, you're more than halfway home.
Wow, thank you. Before we go to the audience, I wonder, Michael, if you have any thoughts about the Chicago advantages, disadvantages in this area?
Well, I mean, in terms of challenges, our challenges are resources and access. We're a very small organization. A lot of times it's just me. We do have a board. We have volunteers who help when they can. But we get by on around $10,000 a year and none of us gets paid. So what we kind of specialize in is showing films that you can't see any other way. 16 millimeter prints of Black Journal episodes. How many people in here remember Black Journal? Shown on a portable 16 millimeter projector on a table, with a pop-up screen that I have to, throw in my car and bring over. And if the venue doesn't have a sound system, I've got that too. I can put that in my trunk. But then, I have to put it all up, and then at the end, I got to take it all down. And access, again, I'm the white guy, and sometimes there's an understandable level of suspicion on the part of venues, African American venues. Like, who are you? Why do you want to do this? For example, for years we wanted to do screenings at the DuSable Museum, but it took 2 staff members coming to one of our screenings at another venue, at Blanc Gallery, which is in the same building as the Defender. We did a couple screenings. They had an exhibit about the Great Migration, so we did a couple of screenings. And the now former events board or events public programs and events manager, Connie Hedspeth, and the now former CFO, Troy Ratliff, came to those 2 screenings. And in fact, at one of them, I didn't have a speaker, so we finished the movie, and I was like, all right, bye. And then Troy just said, let's put the chairs in a circle, let's talk about this. And he led a discussion because the film meant a lot to him. And they said, you need to come and do screenings at the DuSable. So last year we did a 6-screening series of films about Black women to celebrate the 100th birthday of Margaret Burroughs. And we put our friends to work. We got Jackie to come in and introduce the screening.
Yeah, that's my job.
And it was really, the whole series was glorious, but the greatest moment was we showed a 1970 episode of Black Journal called The Black Woman, where Tony Brown and company took the day off. They turned the studio over to Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and all of these wonderful, amazing, Lena Horne, and to be we were in the smaller auditorium over there, which comfortably seats about 60, 45, and there were 90 people in there, and they were cheering, and it was just so wonderful. And so it was worth the wait. And then we had similar experiences. Like we also we just finished a series of films about undocumented immigrants, and it was really difficult to go into Pilsen and Little Village as a white guy who doesn't speak Spanish and say, you should trust me that I have, that my, that I'm going to do this right and I'm going to be respectable. And again, I've been trying for years to get into the National Museum of Mexican Art, and it hasn't happened yet, but I feel like if I keep at it, it'll happen.
Yeah, that question of building trust is extremely important, I think.
I mean, it was certainly an issue at Black Cinema House.
Yeah.
Which was one of the reasons why, I was the organizer, I was the administrator, I was not the programmer. I mean, other than programming people.
Right.
Because, when Miss Irma came in, and it was like, who are you? And why are you?
Right.
I think when I first met her, she said, why did he pick you? And I had to explain, well, because I know how to do this, and I'm a friend of his, and I explained what I thought my role was, and I think she believed me.
Right. And those individual relationships and ongoing programming can do that kind of work, but it's always in dialogue with these deeper questions. I certainly get a lot of questions as a University of Chicago faculty member, like, what's the U of C, what, like, to come here, to get people to come here is not a small thing. And there are solid historical reasons for why, yeah. I want to open it up to questions from you guys.
I just wanted to say that I know that you were talking about how the submission rate in some of the films has went up over the last few years as opposed to in recent times. And you were saying that you were more appreciative that, some of the bad stuff came in late. And I just wanted to ask, what some of those films, about? Just so I can get an idea of
What not to do.
possibly might be the criteria of what you guys are looking for.
The criteria, no.
As an aspiring.
Criteria is, it's a black film.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. I mean, we show everything, documentaries, feature shorts. This year, we got more experimental films than ever before, which was really great because we didn't before. One or two here and there. This year, we got quite a few. One terrific one from the UK. So, no, the criteria, is it good?
Let's throw it out that way. I just meant what was some of those films like the bad?
No, I'm not going to talk about that. No. They could be watching. They could be here. No. Not going to do that. But it's a bad movie when you see one.
All right, I'll do it. I'll do it.
Fine, you do
Okay.
it.
No, what I was going to add to that is a lot of times, because we were movie theaters, ICE theaters, a lot of filmmakers would come looking for us because they want their film on the screen. And, in the early days, I made a commitment that I wanted to see more black film on the screen. And I challenged Cineplex Odeon because we could to say, when I say I want this film and to get a film deal and not a four-wall, we're going to do it. I learned over time, though, that you can't offer that to everyone, and that if I offer it, I have to feel good that people will do what they need to do their part. Because in a movie theater, as a movie theater owner, I don't market the film. Studios market the film. That's why they get the big bucks, because they market the film. So I have the expectation, when you come to me and I give you a film deal, that you're going to do whatever you can to get butts in seats. And when they don't do that, over time I learned the only incentive for people, filmmakers, because they don't save enough money to market. They create these films, whether they're good or bad, they create the films and forget about marketing, what it takes to distribute a film. And so I learned over time that I needed to change my strategy. I wasn't going to be as hard-nosed and just say no as most major exhibitors would. But what I did is I made the rental fee reasonable, very reasonable, so that all you had to do is a little bit of work. Focus on how you get. And I didn't have to say you didn't have to buy radio. I mean, some of the things you've heard here, even with Black Light, it is basically street marketing, in the sense that you can develop a flyer that gets out, that gets to the right people. Think about who is the target. Too often I hear African Americans come into, because I'll give everybody an hour. And they come in, and my film is for everybody. Well, shit, everybody, ain't nothing for everybody. Okay, and if you can't communicate who your film is, and if you don't have an understanding that we are all, mostly black people in this room. You're adopted, and we don't all have the same taste. Right. He into kung fu. That's not what I'm into. It just isn't. And so if you can't articulate who your film is for, you're going to have a hard time marketing. So that tells me a lot when you walk in the door. Right. And so bad film, I've seen a lot. Bad film is, from their terminology, and I'm not really good, it's the cinematography. It's how it's written. You know, it is, it's a story written well. It's a lot of elements that it would take him a long time to tell you what a bad film is. But those are the things you need to do outside before you ever see me, because I don't critique films.
Right.
You know, I see end products. People have come and brought me scripts. I don't know about a script. That may be them. I don't know about a script. So that's
So
Can I add one thing?
really quickly, because I want to get at least a couple
No,
more
I
questions.
just want to add one thing here.
Yeah.
Because, of course, we're based in Chicago, we have a commitment to showing films by local filmmakers. And we do a series of Chicago shorts. You know, sometimes they don't quite make the cut, but we put them in the program. We got a documentary this year, which I think is pretty good, which features somebody who's in this very room.
Who are you looking at?
I'll talk to him afterwards. But let me tell you something. A film came in early. It was one of the earliest submissions that came in. And someone told me, said, you got to take a look at this movie. I know the woman who produced this film. And I'm thinking it's a short. It's a feature, right? I think this is the best feature movie we've ever shown. This is phenomenal. It deals with Afrofuturism and spirituality, and it's phenomenal. It's really good. Shot around Hyde Park, up around South Side, and I mean, this thing is good. Huh? What? No, we're going to show it at the festival. We're going to show it at Black Harvest, with no doubt about it. We're very proud to show it, because this is what I've been waiting for a long time. A really, really good locally made feature film. First-time writer, first-time producer. I'm not sure about the director has made a movie before. This thing is knock up. I'll tell you, come afterwards, I'll tell you the name of it. But this is what we've been waiting for, and what we want to do and promote more
Yes.
of.
Yes.
My question is, what can be done to have more true life, multicultural families? Because I think that now, with all of the things that we're dealing with in true life, a lot of people, like Lisa was saying, butts in the seat at the theater, and this gentleman was saying that he operated on a $10,000 budget. So perhaps if people had more film that they could relate to more, they were more prompt to come out and we shove those finances into that venue, which would ultimately grow the big.
When you say films to relate to, what do you mean? Give me an example.
I'm a graduate of Columbia College, and I happen to go into a little bit of acting and film and video. So I ended up writing a video, a black video, but it was film to everybody. It was about the cocaine that was coming into the cities, okay, and how it was destroying people. Anyway, I got an A on it, and the professors were really proud, but I had a hard time getting it published, and that was around the time I graduated in 1991. So it was around the time where MTV was really popping pretty much. So what I found was, just as you said, for black film as well as black video, that door needs to be open, but also a door of more true to life stories. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, let me give you an example. Last year, one of the things, usually you see a trend. And one of the trends we got last year, there were movies about violence in black neighborhoods, okay? We got 6 of them. Okay, we can't show all 6. And all the various 6 were in various levels of quality, right? We picked the best one of that group because it was an issue that had to be addressed. But we can't show all 6, you know. And so first of all, one thing I noticed is that just from my experience, there always seems to be a trend. You know, one year is something, like, it seems like a lot of filmmakers get the same idea at the same time. And then I see a lot of films that, well, that was just like the last 4 films we just seen. About 10 years ago, we got a whole bunch of what I call Tyler Perry ripoffs. because that's what everybody wanted to do, right? This year, surprisingly, the great thing is that there's no trend. Because filmmakers are saying, and now I'm free to do whatever I want to do. I'm not gonna follow that, I'm not gonna follow this, I really wanna do what I wanna do, you know? I'm quite sure next year, we're probably gonna see some Afrofuturism
Yeah.
stuff. I can see it, I can tell next year, you know? But there's no agenda this year that I have seen, which I think is wonderful.
When you talk about films that people want to see, there's the internet is a real interesting place. I mean, YouTube is probably the best thing that's ever been invented, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you can see the history of cinema, the history of cartoons. There's films that are out there. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. It's just that you have to know where to look, you know. Making that stuff available, I mean, is really what the streaming channels are for. You know, like you find that like Filmstruck is picking up a lot of the foreign films from the 60s and the 70s. Black World Cinema is curating the same thing online. We're trying to develop the same kind of thing. If you look online, if you look up black films, and there's like several black streaming sites out there. You know, there's another Black World Cinema streaming site that does a whole bunch of hokey, oh my God. And it was started by somebody I know, which is really weird. But that's okay, because we're Black World Cinema Chicago, and that Chicago says exactly who we are, so I don't really worry about it. But people are doing so much right now. We've been doing an Afrofuturism film competition for the last 3 years. And the first year we got 1,500 entries, right? 1,500 entries. 1,000 of them had nothing to do with Afrofuturism. Because that's what happens online, right? People are so anxious. But I found a lot of really interesting films that weren't Afrofuturism that I would show in another context, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, if you've got a film, you have to put it out there. Even in terms of bad films, they have bad film festivals. They have festivals for bad films, right? And I've gone to them and been quite surprised and enjoyed myself, right? You know, like I've been to like every major festival in the world, and I started going to horror festivals and the dance festival and the toy festival and the stop motion festival, because you just never know what you're going to find in these things, you know. But there's a world of cinema out there, and you have to look for it, because it ain't going to be in your local theaters a lot of times. You know, you got to go to Chicago Filmmakers. You got to go to Southside Projections. You've got to find these little venues and find these things. We are doing we're doing an Afrofuturism program at Chicago Filmmakers July 28th, right? And we're bringing some new Afrofuturism films. A couple old, but we've got this film by a woman by the name of Janine Talbot, who did a film called Sight. We showed Sight with Black Panther, which was an incredible conversation afterwards, because the ideas in her film are really crystallized, whereas the Disney Black Panther film never gets a chance to do that, right? Because the Black Panther, as we knew the Black Panther growing up, was, you know, Wakanda was Katanga. Does anybody know what Katanga is? Katanga is what Patrice Lumumba was murdered over, right? It's like, it's really, you know, the Black Panther character was very dear to us because we grew up in that period. The rise of, the rise of Cuba, Africa being free, independent Africa. So when we read that thing in July 1966, and somebody said Wakanda, that's like Katanga, right? And Jack Kirby was right there, because that's what he does. That's what this cat did. He studied these deep cultures, right? And the Black Panther character was his reimagining of Patrice Lumumba, and people, and nobody, and what got me is nobody wrote about that. In all the conversations about this, nobody wrote about that. But these are the types of things you learn when you come to these alternative film programs.
Right, exactly.
Because these are the things that we talk about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that aspect of the conversation afterward, I think, and Michael touched on this too, is another way where you can even take a film that may not seem relevant or related to real life
Yeah.
and make those connections.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because we show things that are archival, I can't preview most of them. Like, there's no screener, I can't go to YouTube. And we've done screenings where it's like, the movie's done, and it's like, well, that was really bad. Let's talk about it. What would have been a better way to present the information that this filmmaker wanted to get across?
Yeah, yeah. Do we have one last question or comment from anyone?
Just one more.
Yeah,
I
Beth.
need to get the information, your information, each one of you, please. I have a friend who's making a documentary and has made some, and she wanted to be here, but she couldn't. Can I get your information when this is over?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's some Black Harvest flyers right on that table over there that I left over there.
Okay.
So.
Wonderful. I also want to mention that the CAN TV broadcast of this conversation will be airing next week, as I understand it. And if you sign in on our sign-in sheet at the table back there, we can let everybody know exactly when it's going to be airing. And we hope that you'll watch it and you'll share information about this discussion with your friends and your neighbors so that other people can learn from this amazing group.
Yes.
And don't forget blackworldcinema.net.
Any other promotional?
Blackworldcinema.net, also Facebook. Look up Black World Cinema. You can also go to, we have an archival for the Blacklight Film Festival. And bwctv.tv for the streaming channel.
And I brought some programs from previous Black Perspectives programs for Chicago International Film Festivals that the Chicago International Film Festival that you can take a look at. One from, I guess, Steve McQueen's year, we honored him, and Anthony Mackie, and Alfred Willard, and Sidney Poitier, and Ruby Dee, and Andre Benjamin. These two I have to protect with my life. But you're certainly free to take a look at them. And this year, the Chicago International Film Festival is October 13th through the 20th, so mark your calendars. Make sure you search out, again, some of these amazing films that we show. I mean, these films are available, but sometimes you have to search them out. And all of us who tried to bring these films to Chicago tried to get an audience for these filmmakers because that's what they want to see. They want to come and see and hear from the audience about how the views of their films and how people feel about them. And it sometimes really kills me when people say they want to see some good films or some alternative films, and and they don't really participate or show up. So please search out, all of these festivals, Black Harvest, Black World Cinema, and encourage these young filmmakers who are trying to do what they can in the industry, and help give them an audience.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to add that I can't tell you right now it's crunch time for us, but by end of next week, we will at least have a schedule. We will know what we'll be showing at Black Harvest this year. We have some films already committed with some names you'll recognize who are coming. A few other films we're still working at. I will tell you this, there are two movies by two major Black directors, which I know are going to be shown at CIFF. I know. One of them,
probably more than that.
one of those movies, they shot for a week on my block. You want to know what movie that is?
I know what that. I know
You know
what
the
that
movie that
is.
is?
Yeah.
Right. I guarantee you that film
Mysterious.
is going to be at CIFF. And another major movie by a major director is the film I've been waiting to see all year, based on a legendary novel.
Just say it, no one's gonna tell us.
And I'm not going to tell you what it is.
He's already giving more information than.
I know. Michael, you'll say some titles, maybe.
So we're at southsideprojections.org and also on Facebook. I'm taking a couple months off because I'm tired. I mentioned that sometimes it's just me and our main volunteers have other commitments, and so I did this immigration series mostly by myself. But we'll be back in August at the DuSable. I think on the 2nd, WTTW just did a film on the 370th, the Regiment of African Americans based here in Chicago that fought in World War II. And the DuSable has a show about the same regiment, so we're going to show the film there. The director, probably Dr. Christopher Reed from Roosevelt University, and the curator of the show will be part of the panel. It's tentatively August 2nd. We should know very soon. And you'll find that information at southsideprojections.org and on Facebook. Oh, and we're doing a series this fall about the Black Arts Movement in Chicago, which includes the first Chicago screening of the restored print of The Cry of Jazz, which Jackie Stewart will be introducing because I love to put Jackie to work. And at another screening, her archivist Candace Ming, who I think snuck out, she's going to be talking about archival film about black art spaces on Chicago's South Side. We're still working out all the details on that, but that should be up pretty soon.
Excellent, thank you. And Cinema 53 has a few summer programs that we'll be doing, probably an outdoor screening. And we'll be screening films all day as part of the Silver Room Block Party in the Harper Theater. So we'll have a space in there where if you get hot outside, you want to sit down, you can watch some films on the theme of Black Beauty.
And look for the film, Wayne Shorter's film we're going to be screening, Zero Gravity, a film about the saxophonist Wayne Shorter. Yeah, we're going to do probably 3 weeks of jazz films, 3 or 4 weeks of jazz films, maybe late August.
Excellent.
So.
Well, thank you all for your work. Thank you for being here.